Mafia boss found his ex-wife begging on the street. What followed broke him. The wind cutting through the downtown streets of Riverton was bitter enough to freeze breath in the lungs, but Leon Romano barely felt it. He stepped out of the heavy glass doors of Valenti's, the most exclusive restaurant in the city, and buttoned his charcoal wool coat. The fabric was soft, Italian, and cost more than most people in this neighborhood earned in 3 months. It did nothing to warm the ice that had settled in his chest during dinner. He was 35 years old, in the prime of his life and at the height of his power. Yet he felt ancient. The meeting had been a disaster masked as a celebration. His lieutenants had toasted to the quarter's profits, clinking crystal glasses filled with vintage red wine. But Leon had watched their eyes. He was looking for a flicker of deceit. The Federal Organized Crime Division was pressing hard on the Romano family operations. They knew things they should not know. They anticipated shipments. They froze assets within hours of transfers. There was a leak. A rat was gnawing at the foundation of the empire Leon had spent the last decade fortifying. And tonight, looking at the men he had known since childhood, he realized he could not trust a single one of them. The valet brought his car around, a sleek black sedan that hummed with quiet. Expensive power. The driver, a broad-shouldered man named Marcus who spoke only when spoken to, opened the back door. "Home," Leon said, his voice rougher than he intended. Marcus nodded and eased the car into the flow of evening traffic. Leon leaned his head back against the leather headrest and closed his eyes. The city lights of Riverton strobed across his face in rhythmic flashes of amber and white. He tried to clear his mind, but his thoughts drifted, as they often did in the quiet moments, to the past, to the silence of his penthouse, to the empty space on the other side of the bed that had remained cold for 3 years. He told himself he hated her. He had built a fortress of resentment around the memory of Maya Collins. She had vanished without a trace, without a note, without a single word of explanation. One day she was his wife, the center of his violent, chaotic world, and the next, she was a ghost. He had convinced himself she had run because she was weak, or worse, because she had never truly loved him. He told himself she had taken his heart and thrown it into the garbage so she could live a simpler life with someone who did not carry a gun. The car slowed. Leon opened his eyes. Irritated by the interruption of his brooding, they were stopped at a red light in a transition district, the border where the glittering skyline of the financial sector gave way to the shadowed, gritty reality of the warehouse district. The streetlights here were dimmer, flickering with neglect. He glanced idly out the tinted window. Snow was beginning to fall, dusting the cracked sidewalks. On the corner, illuminated by the harsh red glow of the traffic signal, a figure stood huddled against the brick wall of a closed pawn shop. It was a woman. She wore a coat that was 3 sizes too big, the gray wool stained and torn at the hem. A hood obscured her face, but her hands were visible. They were red and trembling, clutching a piece of cardboard with shaky handwriting. "Please help. Anything helps. God bless." Leon felt a flicker of pity, a rare emotion for a man in his position, but he started to look away. Then, the woman shifted her weight. She lifted her head slightly to look at the cars stopped at the light, hoping for a window to roll down. The street lamp above her buzzed and flared, casting a sudden pool of white light onto her face. Leon's heart stopped. The world outside the car vanished, the sound of the engine, the heater, his own breathing. It all ceased. The cheekbones were sharper than he remembered, hollowed out by hunger. The skin was pale, almost translucent. The hair, once a cascade of golden silk that smelled of vanilla and jasmine, was dull and matted, tucked messily under the hood. But the eyes, he would know those eyes in the dark, in hell, in the next life. They were large, expressive, and currently filled with a desolate, crushing hopelessness. Maya, it was impossible. His mind rejected the image. Maya was in Europe. She was in California. She was with another man, living in a suburban house with a white fence, spending the money he assumed she had stolen or hidden. She was not here. She was not standing on a street corner in Riverton in the middle of winter, begging for loose change. "Stop the car," Leon commanded. His voice was a whisper, but it carried the weight of a scream. The light turned green. Marcus began to ease his foot onto the gas. "Stop the car," Leon roared, his hand slamming against the leather partition. Marcus slammed on the brakes, the tires chirping against the asphalt, before the vehicle had even come to a complete halt. Leon was shoving the door open. The biting cold assaulted him instantly, a physical shock that matched the chaos in his mind. He stepped onto the slush-covered road. Horns blared from the cars behind them, angry drivers shouting obscenities, but Leon heard none of it. He only saw her. He walked toward the sidewalk, his expensive dress shoes crunching on the ice. He moved like a man walking toward his own execution, terrified of the truth, yet unable to turn away. The woman on the corner noticed the commotion. She saw the black luxury car stopped in the middle of the lane. She saw the tall, imposing figure in the charcoal coat walking straight toward her with predatory focus. Instinct took over. She flinched, pulling the cardboard sign against her chest like a shield, and dipped her head, trying to make herself invisible. Leon stopped 3 feet away from her. The smell of the street, exhaust, damp garbage, and old snow was overwhelming. "Maya," he said, the name hung in the freezing air. Heavy and broken, the woman went rigid, her breath hitched, creating a small cloud of steam. Slowly, agonizingly, she lifted her head. When her gaze locked with his, the air left her lungs completely. Leon stared at her, his brain struggling to reconcile the memory of the woman he had married with the broken creature standing before him. He took in the details he had missed from the car, the dirt smudged on her cheek, the way her lips were chapped and bleeding, the utter terror in her eyes. Maya instinctively stepped back, her boots scuffing against the brick wall. There was nowhere to go. She looked like a trapped animal. "Leon," she whispered. Her voice was rasping, unused, as if she had not spoken to another human being in days. He felt as though someone had reached into his chest and squeezed his heart until it burst. He took a step closer, his hand reaching into his pocket, not for a weapon, but for his wallet. He didn't know what he was doing. He just wanted to fix it. He wanted to erase the image of her holding that cardboard sign. Maya took another step back, stumbling over her own feet. She shook her head violently. "No," she said, her voice rising in panic. "No, go away." Leon froze. Her rejection was a slap to the face. He was the one who had been abandoned. He was the one who had spent 3 years wondering why he wasn't enough. And here she was, in rags, telling him to leave. "Maya," he said, his voice hardening, edging toward the tone he used with his men. "Look at you. I said go away," she cried out, clutching her worn backpack tighter. "I do not want your money. I do not want anything from you." She turned, intending to run, though she looked too weak to make it half a block. The anger hit him then. It was a hot, molten surge that burned through the shock. How dare she? How dare she leave him, destroy him, and then end up like this? It was an insult to the life they had built. It was an insult to him. He lunged forward and grabbed her wrist. He did not squeeze. He was careful, even in his fury, aware of how fragile she felt beneath the layers of dirty wool. But his grip was iron. He was not letting her go. Not again. "Let me go," she gasped, pulling weakly against him. "What happened to you?" Leon demanded. He ignored her struggle, pulling her a step closer so he could look down into her face. "Why are you here? Why are you doing this? I had no choice," she stammered, tears beginning to spill over her lashes, cutting clean tracks through the grime on her cheeks. "You had no choice?" Leon repeated, his laugh devoid of humor. "You left. You walked out of our home in the middle of the night without a word. You vanished. Maya, I tore this city apart looking for you. I thought you were dead. I wished you were dead so it would hurt less." "Please, Leon," she begged, her voice cracking. "You do not understand. Just let me go. Pretend you never saw me. Pretend I never saw you," he hissed. He looked at the cardboard sign still clutched in her other hand. "You are begging for pennies on a street corner. Maya, you were the wife of Leon Romano. You had everything, you had the world, and you threw it away for this." "I did not throw it away," she shouted, a flash of her old fire sparking in her eyes. "I did it to save you." The words hung between them, confusing him. To save him, it made no sense. It was another lie, another riddle from a woman who had become a stranger. The traffic around them was getting louder. People were staring. A few pedestrians had stopped, watching the well-dressed man confront the homeless woman. Leon realized the scene they were causing. He realized how exposed they were. He looked at her wrist, still held in his hand. He could feel the bone. She was starving. The realization snapped the last thread of his restraint, his pride, his anger, his 3 years of bitterness. None of it mattered as much as the terrifying fact that she was freezing and starving in front of him. He turned toward the car. Marcus was standing by the open door, watching warily, hand hovering near his jacket pocket in case a threat emerged. "Get in the car," Leon ordered, looking back at Maya. "No," she said, digging her heels in. "I cannot go with you. It is not safe. I am not asking." Leon growled. He signaled to Marcus. The driver moved instantly, crossing the distance in 3 long strides. "Help her into the car," Leon commanded. "Gently. If you bruise her, I will break your hand." Maya tried to pull away, but she was exhausted, her reserves of energy completely depleted by the cold and the shock. Marcus took her other arm, his touch respectful but firm, guiding her toward the open back door of the sedan. "You can yell at me later," Leon said, his voice dropping to a low rumble close to her ear. "You can curse my name. You can tell me you hate me, but you are not sleeping on the street tonight. Not while I have breath in my body." Defeated. Maya slumped. She allowed herself to be guided into the warmth of the car. The smell of the interior, rich leather and Leon's cologne, a scent of cedar and spice that she had dreamed about for 1,000 nights, hit her like a physical blow. It was the smell of safety. It was the smell of home. And it terrified her. Leon slid in beside her and pulled the door shut, sealing out the noise of the city. "Drive," he said to Marcus. The car pulled away from the curb, gliding smoothly back into the traffic. Inside the cabin, the silence was suffocating. Maya sat pressed as far against the door as she could manage, her arms wrapped tightly around her midsection. She refused to look at him. She was ashamed. She knew what she looked like. She knew the contrast between his tailored suit and her filth was stark. She felt small, dirty, and utterly broken. Leon sat on the opposite side, his body rigid. He removed his gloves slowly, his eyes never leaving her. Now that they were under the soft interior lights of the car, he could see the damage more clearly. There was a bruise fading on her jawline, yellow and green. Her knuckles were raw, but it was her thinness that haunted him. Her clothes hung on her frame like they were draped over a skeleton. Rage boiled in his gut. Who had done this? Who had touched her? Who had let her fall this far? And why? The treacherous voice in his head whispered. Did she let herself fall this far rather than call him? He wanted to scream. He wanted to wrap her in his coat. He wanted to shake the answers out of her. "How long?" he asked. His voice was steady, but tight. Maya stared at her knees. 3 months on the street, she whispered. Before that, I was moving around. 3 years. Maya, he said. You have been gone 3 years. Where were you? She stayed silent. Leon clenched his jaw. He looked at the partition separating them from the driver, ensuring the glass was up. Are you hungry? He asked. She nodded slightly, a jerky motion. We are going to the penthouse, he stated. Maya's head snapped up. No, Leon, please, I cannot go back there. Why? He demanded, his eyes narrowing. Is there someone waiting for you? Is that it? No, she said quickly. Then what? He leaned forward, closing the distance between them. His intensity filled the small space. Did you leave me for someone else? Maya, is that why you ran? Did you find a lover who promised you a better life and then dumped you on a corner when the money ran out? The accusation hung in the air, cruel and sharp. Maya looked at him, her eyes wide with shock. She saw the pain behind his anger. He truly believed she had betrayed him. He believed she had left him for another man. She opened her mouth to deny it, to tell him the truth about the threats, the men who had come to her, the promise that he would be arrested or killed if she did not leave. But the fear choked her. The warning had been clear. Contact him, and he dies. She pressed her lips together and looked away, tears blurring her vision. Her silence was the worst answer she could have given him. Leon sat back, the air leaving his lungs. He felt a coldness spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the winter night. She wasn't denying it. "Fine," he said, his voice turning icy. "Keep your secrets, but you are coming with me. You are going to get cleaned up. You are going to eat, and then we are going to figure out what to do with you." The car descended a ramp, the daylight fading into the artificial yellow gloom of the underground garage. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs. She recognized the pillars. She recognized the smell of the concrete. This was the building where they had lived for the 2 years of their marriage. This was where she had been happiest. And this was where she had left her wedding ring on the nightstand before slipping out into the darkness. The car stopped in Leon's private bay. Marcus opened the door. Leon stepped out and waited. He extended a hand toward her. It was a gentleman's gesture, automatic and ingrained, but his face was hard as stone. Maya hesitated. She looked at his hand, large, capable, dangerous. If she took it, she was stepping back into the spider's web. She was stepping back into the crosshairs of the people who hunted him. But looking at the cold concrete floor, she realized she had no fight left. She was tired. She was so incredibly tired. She reached out and placed her trembling, dirty hand in his. His fingers closed around hers. They were warm. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through her arm, waking up nerves she thought had died long ago. She slid out of the car, her legs wobbling. Leon did not let go. He kept his grip firm, pulling her toward the private elevator that led directly to the penthouse. As the doors slid open, revealing the mirrored interior, Maya caught her reflection next to his, the monster and the prince, the ruin and the king. Fear tightened her chest, but beneath it, a traitorous, desperate flicker of longing sparked to life. She was back in his world, and God help her. She felt safer than she had in 3 years. "Get in," Leon said. She stepped inside. The doors slid shut, sealing their fate. The elevator doors slid open with a soft, expensive hush, revealing the sprawling expanse of the penthouse that occupied the entire top floor of the obsidian tower. Leon Romano stepped out first, his presence commanding the space immediately, but Maya hesitated on the threshold. She remembered this room. She remembered the way the floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Riverton skyline, like a jagged, glittering painting of light and steel. She remembered the scent of white tea and leather that always lingered in the air. But as she stood there, clutching the straps of her filthy backpack, she felt like an intruder in her own memory. The gleaming marble floors reflected the recessed lighting, creating a mirror effect that made Maya look down at her boots. They were worn through at the toes, stained with the gray slush of the streets, leaving faint, wet marks on the pristine stone. "Come in," Leon said. He was standing by the island in the kitchen, tossing his keys onto the counter. The sound echoed in the silence. He looked at her, and his gaze was heavy, stripping away the years and the grime, searching for the woman he had married. Maya took a tentative step forward. The warmth of the apartment was overwhelming after the biting winter wind. It seeped into her bones, making her shiver uncontrollably as her body tried to adjust. She caught her reflection in the darkened glass of the nearest window and flinched. The woman staring back was a stranger, gaunt, gray-skinned, with hollow eyes that looked like bruises against her pale face. She looked like a stain on the perfection of Leon's world. "I should not be here," she whispered, her voice rough. Leon ignored the statement. He walked over to a wall panel and adjusted the temperature, then pulled his phone from his pocket. "I am calling Doctor Aris," he said. "He will be here in 20 minutes. "No," Maya protested, panic flaring in her chest. "I do not need a doctor. I just need to leave." "You are not leaving," Leon said, his tone brokering no argument. "And looking at you, you definitely need a doctor." He dialed, turning his back to her to speak in low, clipped tones. Maya stood frozen in the center of the living room, afraid to touch anything. The velvet sofas, the abstract sculptures, the heavy silk drapes, it all screamed of money and power, the two things that had chewed her up and spit her out. Leon ended the call and turned back to her. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, before walking toward the hallway that led to the guest suites. He returned a moment later, holding a thick, white terry cloth robe and a fresh towel. "Go to the guest bathroom," he said, holding them out to her. "The water gets hot instantly. There is soap and shampoo in the shower. Scrub it all off. Maya, all of it." She looked at the clean, white fabric in his hands, then down at her own dirty, trembling fingers. Shame burned hot in her cheeks. She reached out and took the items, careful not to brush against his skin. "Thank you," she murmured. She retreated to the guest bathroom, locking the door behind her with a trembling hand. The room was a sanctuary of marble and chrome. She turned on the tap, and steam began to fill the air almost immediately. Maya peeled off the layers of oversized, filthy clothes she had been living in for months. When she finally stood naked before the large vanity mirror, a sob caught in her throat. Her ribs pressed against her skin like the bars of a cage. Her hip bones were sharp protrusions. There were fading yellow bruises on her upper arms where a shopkeeper had grabbed her last week, and older, darker marks on her ribs from the nights she had not been fast enough to hide. She looked broken. She turned away from the reflection and stepped into the shower. The hot water hit her skin like a physical blow, stinging the raw patches. But the heat was so glorious, so necessary, that she slumped against the tile wall and let it beat down on her. The soap lathered rich and fragrant, smelling of sandalwood. She scrubbed at her skin until it turned red, trying to wash away the smell of the streets, the fear, and the shame. As the dirt swirled down the drain, the emotional dam broke. Maya slid down the wall until she was curled in a ball on the shower floor, the water cascading over her, and she wept. She cried silently, her mouth open in a scream that made no sound, mourning the life she had lost and the woman she used to be. In the living room, Leon paced. He moved with the restless energy of a caged tiger. He had poured himself a glass of scotch, but had not taken a sip. He walked to the window and looked out at the city. His city, but all he could see was the image of Maya shivering on that corner. How had this happened? He remembered their honeymoon in Como, the way the sunlight had caught in her hair as she laughed on the deck of the boat. He remembered the nights in this very apartment, her legs tangled with his in the sheets, her voice whispering that she would love him until the stars burned out. And then she had left. The anger that had sustained him for 3 years was still there, a hard knot in his chest, but it was cracking. Every time he thought of her gaunt face, the anger dissolved into a sickening mixture of guilt and terror. If he had been better, if he had been more attentive, would he have seen the signs? She said she had no choice. What did that mean? He heard the faint sound of the shower running, and for a moment, he closed his eyes, tortured by the proximity. She was here. She was hurting. And he did not know if he wanted to punish her for leaving or burn the world down for hurting her. The doorbell rang. It was Dr. Aris, a gray-haired man who had stitched up more Romano soldiers than the local emergency room. He carried a leather medical bag and a discreet expression. "Where is the patient?" Aris asked. "In the shower," Leon said. "She will be out in a minute." Leon went to his own bedroom. He opened his closet, rows of tailored suits staring back at him. He bypassed them and opened a drawer, pulling out a plain black t-shirt and a pair of gray sweatpants. He hesitated, holding the soft cotton. These were his. She used to steal his shirts on Sunday mornings, walking around the kitchen with bare feet, making espresso. He gripped the fabric tight, fighting the memory, then turned and walked back to the living room just as the bathroom door opened. Maya emerged wrapped in the white robe, a towel turbaned around her head. Her face was scrubbed clean, pink from the heat, but the color only highlighted the dark circles under her eyes. She looked younger, more vulnerable, and heartbreakingly beautiful. "The doctor is here," Leon said, his voice devoid of emotion. Maya stiffened but nodded. The examination was quick and professional. Leon stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching like a sentinel. Doctor. Aris checked her vitals, examined the bruises with gentle fingers, and shone a light in her eyes. Malnutrition, certainly, Aris said, packing his stethoscope away. Mild dehydration. The bruising is superficial, mostly healing. She is exhausted. Leon, her body has been in survival mode for a long time. She needs rest, high-calorie food introduced slowly, and safety. He wrote a prescription for vitamins and handed it to Leon. Keep her warm. Feed her. If she develops a fever, call me. Thank you, doctor, Leon said. When the door clicked shut behind the doctor, the silence returned, heavier than before. Leon held out the clothes he had retrieved. Put these on. I threw your other things in the trash chute. Maya took the t-shirt and sweatpants. Thank you, she whispered. She retreated to the bathroom again and emerged 5 minutes later. The sweatpants were rolled at the waist, and the black t-shirt hung off her shoulder. Falling to her mid-thigh, her hair was damp, combing out in dark, wet waves that clung to her neck. Leon looked at her, and his breath caught in his throat. For a second, the last 3 years evaporated. She looked exactly like she had on those lazy Sunday mornings, soft and attainable. A sudden, violent rush of desire hit him, a need to cross the room, bury his hands in her damp hair, and pull her against him to prove she was real. He looked away sharply, focusing on the marble countertop. Sit down, he ordered, gesturing to the dining table. I made food. He had not cooked in years, usually relying on takeout or chefs, but tonight he had needed to do something with his hands. A simple plate of pasta with olive oil, garlic, and parmesan sat on the table. It was not fancy, but the smell filled the room. Maya sat. She picked up the fork, her hand trembling slightly. She took a small bite. The flavor exploded on her tongue, salt, fat, garlic. Her stomach cramped initially, then roared to life. She tried to eat slowly, tried to be dignified, but the hunger was a primal beast that had been starved for too long. She took another bite, then another. Faster this time. Leon sat across from her, a glass of water in front of him. He did not eat. He just watched. He watched the way she closed her eyes when she swallowed. He watched the desperate speed of her fork, and as he watched, the guilt tightened around his throat like a garrote. He was the head of the Romano family. He controlled unions, shipping docks, and half the politicians in the state. He had millions of dollars in offshore accounts, and his wife, his ex-wife, had been starving. Slow down, he said quietly. You will make yourself sick. Maya paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. She lowered it, shame flooding her face again. I'm sorry, she said. Stop apologizing. Leon snapped. It was not anger at her. It was anger at the situation. But she flinched anyway. He took a breath, forcing his voice to level out. Talk to me, Maya. The doctor said you have been in survival mode. Why? What happened the night you left? Maya set the fork down. She stared at the half-empty plate. I told you, she said, her voice barely audible. I had to leave. That is not an answer, Leon said, leaning forward. His eyes bored into hers. You vanished 3 years ago, the same week the FOCD was preparing a RICO case against me. The timing was convenient. Do you not think? She looked up, eyes wide. You think I was working with them? I do not know what to think, Leon admitted, his voice hard. I know you left. I know the case fell apart because the key witness disappeared, and I know I found you on the street. Connect the dots for me. It was not the FOCD. Maya said, it was someone else. Who? I cannot say. Why? Leon slammed his hand on the table. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Maya jumped, her hands shaking violently now. Because they said they would kill you, she cried out. They said if I stayed, you would be distracted. You would be vulnerable. They said the only way to save you was to remove myself from the equation. Who told you that? Leon demanded. She shook her head, tears spilling over again. I cannot. Please. Leon, do not ask me. Her hands were vibrating against the placemat. She looked like she was about to shatter. Leon's anger deflated as quickly as it had risen. He looked at her trembling hands, hands he used to hold, hands that used to smooth the worry lines from his forehead. He moved. He stood up and walked around the table. He pulled the chair out next to her and sat down, turning his body toward hers. He reached out and covered her shaking hand with his own. His palm was warm, broad and calloused. It engulfed her slender fingers, grounding her. "Maya," he said, his voice low and rough, "look at me." She turned her head. Her face was inches from his. He could see the gold flecks in her tear-filled eyes. He could smell the sandalwood soap on her skin, mixing with the clean scent of the cotton shirt. Breath hitched in her chest. The air between them suddenly grew thick, charged with a tension that was not about fear or anger, but something ancient and magnetic. Leon looked at her lips. They were parted slightly, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She looked at him with a mixture of terror and absolute adoration. For a moment, neither of them moved. The world narrowed down to the space between their faces. Leon's thumb moved of its own accord, tracing the delicate bones on the back of her hand, a gentle, rhythmic stroke that sent shivers racing up Maya's arm. She leaned in, just a fraction of an inch, a subconscious surrender. The movement snapped Leon back to reality. He remembered where she had been. He remembered the secrets she was still keeping. He remembered that she had left him. He pulled his hand away as if he had been burned. "Eat your food," he muttered, standing up abruptly. Maya sat frozen, her hand cold where he had touched it. Her cheeks flushed with a sudden, hot embarrassment. She felt the rejection deep in her chest, but beneath it, she felt the terrifying pull of a longing she had tried to starve out of existence. The guest bedroom was quiet and dark, the heavy curtains blocking out the city lights. Maya lay in the center of the massive bed, the high thread count sheets feeling like silk against her skin. It was too soft. It was too quiet. She fell asleep from sheer exhaustion, but her mind did not rest. She was back in the alley. The snow was gray and slushy. A man with no face was towering over her. He wore a dark coat. He had a heavy ring on his finger. "Go back to him and he dies," the voice hissed. It sounded like metal grinding on bone. "We will take everything. We will cut him into pieces and mail them to you." A fist connected with her ribs. Pain exploded, white and hot. She tried to scream, but her mouth was full of blood. "No," she gasped, thrashing against the sheets. "No, please." She woke up with a strangled cry. Sitting bolt upright in the bed, her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was sweating, the t-shirt clinging to her back. The darkness of the room felt suffocating, filled with invisible threats. The door flew open. Maya! Leon was there instantly. He had been awake, sitting in the living room, keeping watch. He crossed the room in 3 strides and sat on the edge of the bed. Maya was hyperventilating, her eyes unseeing in the gloom, her hands clawing at her throat. "Hey," Leon said, his voice urgent but soft. "Hey, look at me. You are safe. You are here." He reached out and grabbed her shoulders. His grip was firm, anchoring her to the present. Maya blinked. The nightmare receding slowly. She saw his face, illuminated by the hallway light, the sharp jaw, the dark eyes filled with concern. "Leon," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I am here," he said. "I am right here." A sob broke from her throat, and she collapsed forward. She didn't think. She just moved. She buried her face in his chest, her arms wrapping around his torso, clinging to him as if he were the only solid thing in a dissolving world. Leon froze for a split second. Then his arms came around her. He held her tight. One hand splayed across her back, the other cradling the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her damp hair. "Shh," he soothed, rocking her slightly. "I have you. Nobody is going to touch you. I promise." Maya pressed closer, listening to the steady, powerful thud of his heart beneath the cotton of his shirt. It was the rhythm she had fallen asleep to for 2 years. It was the sound of safety. The fear began to ebb away, replaced by something warmer, heavier. She became aware of the heat of his body. She became aware of his scent, cedar, spice, and man. She pulled back slightly, tilting her face up to look at him. His eyes were dark, searching hers. The concern was still there, but beneath it, something else was kindling, a fire that had never truly gone out. "Maya," he breathed. Her hand moved up, her fingers clutching the fabric of his shirt at his shoulder. She looked at his mouth. He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. She stayed right there, her breath mingling with his, when his lips brushed hers. It was tentative. A question. Maya let out a soft, shaky exhale, and her eyes fluttered shut. Leon groaned low in his throat and deepened the kiss. It wasn't aggressive, but it was possessive. His hand slid up her spine, pressing her closer against his chest, his fingers splaying possessively over her ribs. His mouth moved over hers with a hunger that spoke of 3 years of starvation. Maya melted, her body arched into him, remembering the fit, remembering the chemistry that had always been their downfall and their salvation. She opened to him, tasting him, feeling the rough stubble of his jaw against her soft skin. For a moment there was no pain, no cartel, no secrets. There was just Leon. His hand moved to her waist, sliding under the hem of the t-shirt, his thumb brushing the bare skin of her hip. The sensation was electric, but it snapped the spell. The reality of her situation, the secrets she was keeping, the danger she was bringing into his house, it all came rushing back. She wasn't the wife he remembered. She was a liability. She broke the kiss, gasping, and pulled back, her hands pushed against his chest. "I can't," she whispered, her voice shaking. Leon stopped instantly. He didn't let go of her, but he froze his movement. His eyes were blown wide, pupils dilated, chest heaving. "I can't do this," she said, tears welling up again. "Not yet. It is too much." Leon stared at her, the desire warring with the protective instinct. He took a deep, ragged breath and nodded. He slowly removed his hands from her, leaving her skin feeling cold and empty. "Okay," he said, his voice rough. "Okay." He stood up from the bed, putting distance between them. He looked at her one last time, his expression a mix of burning need and agonizing concern. "Try to sleep," he said. He turned and walked out of the room, closing the door softly behind him, leaving Maya alone in the dark with the ghost of his touch burning on her skin. The morning sun that filtered into the penthouse was pale and cold, offering little warmth against the floor-to-ceiling glass. Maya sat on one of the velvet bar stools in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a ceramic mug of tea. She wore the same oversized clothes Leon had given her the night before, feeling small within the vast, silent luxury of his home. The elevator chimed, a soft, pleasant sound that made her shoulders jump. Leon looked up from the tablet he was reading at the head of the dining table. He was dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark trousers, his gun holster empty but resting on the table next to his coffee. "It is just Dante," Leon said, his voice calm. "He knows you are here." Maya nodded, but she shrank into herself slightly. Dante Russo was Leon's right hand, his shadow. In the years she had been married to Leon, Dante had been a constant presence, smiling, efficient, and lethal. The elevator doors slid open and Dante stepped out. He was brushing snow off the shoulders of his cashmere coat, looking every bit the polished executive of the underworld. "Boss, I got the report on the shipments from the South Dock." Dante started, his eyes fixed on Leon. Then he turned, and his gaze landed on Maya. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. Dante stopped mid-stride. His eyes widened, flashing with a complex mix of emotions that Maya could not quite parse in her exhausted state. There was shock, certainly. But beneath it, there was a flicker of something sharper, fear, annoyance. It was gone as quickly as it had appeared, smoothed over by a practiced smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "Maya," Dante said, his voice smooth as oiled leather, "it has been a long time. You look, well," it was a lie. She knew she looked like a wreck. "Hello, Dante," she whispered. Leon stood up, walking over to join his lieutenant. He placed a hand on Dante's shoulder, a gesture of brotherhood that made Maya's stomach twist. She knew things Leon did not. She knew that loyalty in this world was often just a matter of price. "She is staying," Leon said, his tone leaving no room for questions. "I want security tripled on the building. No one comes in or out without my direct approval. And put a team on the street where I found her. I want to know if anyone was watching her. Dante nodded, pulling a notebook from his pocket. Of course. If she was threatened before, those threats might still be active. We cannot be too careful. Maya watched Dante's hand as he wrote. The pen moved sharply across the paper. She saw a tightness in his jaw, a microscopic tension in his neck. He was calculating. Do you have any idea who threatened her? Dante asked, glancing at Maya. Not yet, Leon said, his eyes darkening. But when I find them, there will not be enough of them left to bury. Dante closed the notebook with a snap. I will handle the rotation personally. Leon, you should stay here with her. Do not worry about the business today. Thank you, brother, Leon said. Dante gave Maya a curt nod before turning back to the elevator. As the doors closed on his retreating figure, Maya let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. The air in the room felt lighter without him, yet the shadow of his presence lingered. Once they were alone, the silence stretched between them, heavy with unsaid words. Leon returned to the table but did not sit. He watched her, his expression intense. Tell me, he said. Maya looked down into her tea, watching the steam rise in curling ribbons. She knew she could not hide the truth forever. Leon was not a man who accepted half measures. It was the Valdez cartel, she said softly. Leon went still. The Valdez family was a rival organization, brutal and lacking the code of honor that the Romanos tried to maintain. They dealt in everything Leon refused to touch. Valdez, Leon repeated, his voice dangerously low. You went to Valdez? I did not go to them, Maya said, her voice trembling. I was sent to them. She took a sip of tea to steady her nerves, the hot liquid burning her throat. When I left, I was told that the FOCD was building a case that would put you away for life. I was told that my presence was the leverage they were using against you, that if I stayed, I would be the reason you died in prison. Who told you this? Leon demanded. Maya shook her head. Not yet. Please. Leon, just let me finish. She took a deep breath. The person who warned me? They arranged for me to go to a contact in the Valdez organization. They said Valdez would protect me in exchange for a fee. They said I would be hidden, safe from the FOCD and safe from your enemies who might try to use me to get to you. And you believed them? Leon asked, pain etching lines around his mouth. I was terrified. Leon, I thought I was saving you. She set the mug down hard on the granite counter. It was a lie, all of it. The Valdez contact took the money I had. They moved me from safe house to safe house, draining my accounts. And when the money ran out, when they realized I was no longer useful, they kicked me out. Leon's hands clenched into fists at his sides. The knuckles turned white. They put you on the street? They laughed, Maya whispered, tears stinging her eyes. They said if I tried to contact you, they would finish the job the FOCD started. They said they had men inside your organization who would put a bullet in your head the moment I reappeared. Leon began to pace. He moved back and forth across the kitchen, a caged animal radiating pure, volatile energy. He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the perfect style. Valdez. He spat the name like a curse. And someone inside my family sent you to them. Maya nodded. Who? Leon stopped pacing and turned to her. Maya, you have to tell me. If there is a traitor in my house, I need to know. I cannot, she said, her voice rising in panic. If I tell you, you will go after him. And if you go after him without proof, you will start a war inside your own ranks. You are already under pressure from the feds. A civil war would destroy you. Let it destroy me, Leon roared. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, gripping the edge of the counter on either side of her, trapping her in his space. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. Do you think I care about the empire? Do you think I care about the money or the reputation? Maya, look at what they did to you. His voice cracked, the rage fractured, revealing a deep, agonizing well of guilt. If I had known, he whispered, his forehead dropping to rest against hers. If I had known you were suffering, if I had known you left to protect me, I would have burned this entire city to the ground. I would have set fire to the world just to keep you warm. Maya let out a sob. She reached up, her hands cupping his face. His skin was rough with stubble, warm and familiar. "I know," she said softly. "That is why I left. Because I knew you would destroy everything for me, and I could not let you do that. You should have let me choose," Leon said, closing his eyes. "You stole that choice from me. I am sorry." She wept. "I am so sorry." He turned his face into her palm, kissing the center of her hand. "Do you still love me?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Or did the streets take that too? Maya stared at him, at the man who had been her husband, her lover and her protector, the man whose world had nearly killed her, but whose arms were the only place she had ever felt safe. "I never stopped," she confessed, "not for a single second, even when I was sleeping in alleyways, even when I was freezing. I used to close my eyes and pretend I was back here with you. That was the only thing that kept me alive." Leon let out a shuddering breath. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in the crook of her neck, holding her as if she might vanish into smoke if he let go. 2 days passed. The tension in the penthouse shifted. It was no longer the sharp, jagged tension of estrangement, but a thick, coiling awareness. They were two magnets slowly being drawn back together, fighting the resistance of their past trauma. Leon did not leave the apartment. He ran his empire from his phone and laptop, his eyes constantly tracking Maya as she moved through the rooms. He watched her eat, making sure she finished every meal. He watched her sleep on the sofa during the day, guarding her rest. On the third evening, he found her standing by the window, looking out at the city lights. She flinched when a siren wailed in the distance. "Come with me," Leon said. He led her down the hall to a room she had rarely entered, his private training gym. It was a stark space, matted floors and heavy bags, smelling of leather and discipline. "What are we doing?" Maya asked, wrapping her cardigan tighter around herself. "I am going to teach you," Leon said. "Teach me what? How to stop anyone from ever hurting you again." He took off his shoes and stepped onto the mat. He motioned for her to do the same. Maya hesitated, then kicked off her slippers. She felt small and fragile next to his imposing physicality. "I am not a fighter." "Leon," she said. "You do not have to be a soldier," he replied, his voice serious. "You just have to be dangerous." He spent the next hour showing her basic moves, how to break a grip on her wrist, how to use her elbows, how to use an attacker's weight against them. He was patient, his voice low and instructive, but the physical contact was constant. "Again," he said, grabbing her wrist. Maya twisted, using the leverage he had taught her, breaking his hold. "Good," Leon said, "but do not hesitate. Snap it." He moved behind her. "If someone grabs you from behind," he said, wrapping his arms around her waist, pinning her arms to her sides. Maya stiffened. The sensation of being trapped triggered a flash of panic. But then she felt Leon's chest solid against her back. She felt his chin brush her temple. It was not a threat. It was an embrace disguised as a lesson. "Drop your weight," he murmured against her ear. "Become an anchor." Maya bent her knees, sinking down. "Good. Now, drive your elbow back. Here." He guided her arm, his hand covering her fist, moving it toward his own ribs. He was not hurting her, but he was surrounding her. His body was a wall of heat and muscle. "Do you feel that?" he asked. "The center of gravity?" Maya nodded, unable to speak. Her breath was hitching in her chest. The lesson was blurring. The movements were becoming less about defense and more about the way their bodies fit together. Leon did not step away. He kept his arms around her, his hands resting on her hips now. The context of the hold shifted. It was no longer an attack simulation. It was intimacy. Maya turned in his arms. She faced him, her chest rising and falling rapidly. They were standing toe-to-toe on the mat. The air in the room felt heavy, charged with static. Leon looked down at her. His eyes were dark, dilated, focused entirely on her mouth. "You are doing well," he said, his voice rougher than before. Maya looked up at him. She reached out and placed her hands on his chest, over the steady, powerful thud of his heart. "I feel safe with you," she whispered. Leon let out a low groan. He reached up and cupped her jaw, his thumb stroking along her cheekbone. The touch was reverence. It was worship. "I will never let anything happen to you again," he vowed. He lowered his head. This time, when he kissed her, there was no hesitation. It was not the tentative, fearful kiss of the night she arrived. It was possessive. It was assured. Maya opened her mouth to him, a sound of need vibrating in her throat. Leon accepted the invitation, his tongue sweeping into her mouth, tasting her, claiming her. He tasted like mint and dark coffee. His hand slid from her jaw down the curve of her neck, over her shoulders, and settled on the small of her back. He pulled her fully against him, eliminating the space between them. Maya gasped into the kiss as she felt the hardness of his body, the undeniable evidence of his desire. She wound her arms around his neck, her fingers tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck. She pulled him closer, arching into him, wanting to fuse herself to him. The fear of the last 3 years began to dissolve under the heat of his touch. Leon's lips left hers, trailing wet, hot kisses along her jawline. "Maya," he growled against the sensitive skin below her ear. Maya tilted her head back, exposing her throat to him. Her hands gripped his shoulders, her nails digging into the fabric of his shirt. "Leon," she breathed. His hand moved lower, cupping her hip, pulling her leg up to wrap around his waist. The friction was maddening. The want was a physical ache that demanded to be soothed. A sharp buzzing noise cut through the room like a knife. Leon froze. The phone on the bench by the door was vibrating aggressively against the wood. For a second, Leon did not move. His face was buried in her neck, his breathing harsh and ragged. He held her tight, as if willing the world to go away. Then, with a curse that was low and violent, he pulled back. He looked at Maya, his eyes wild, his lips swollen. He touched her cheek one last time, an apology in the gesture. Before turning and walking to the bench, he snatched the phone up. "What?" he barked. Maya stood on the mat, wrapping her arms around herself, the cold rushing back in where his body had been. She watched his face transform. The lover vanished. The Mafia boss returned. Leon's expression hardened into granite. His eyes narrowed. "Where?" he asked. "Are you sure?" He listened for another moment, his jaw clenching rhythmically. "Get the car, the armored SUV. 5 minutes." He hung up and turned to Maya. The desire was gone from his face, replaced by a terrifying, cold focus. "We have to go," he said. "What is it?" Maya asked, fear spiking in her chest. "Valdez," Leon said, walking over to her and grabbing her hand. "My men spotted a scout team near the shelter where you were staying. They are asking questions. They have a photo of you." Maya's blood ran cold. "They are looking for me?" "They are hunting you," Leon corrected. "And if they are at the shelter, it means they are tracking your movements backward. It is only a matter of time before they figure out you are here." "But this is a fortress," Maya said, looking around the room. "It is a glass box in the sky," Leon said grimly. "If they know you are here, they will bring heavy weaponry. I will not risk a siege with you inside." He pulled her toward the door. "Pack a bag. Essentials only. We are leaving now. Where are we going? A safe house," Leon said, marching her down the hallway. "It is on the edge of the city, off the grid. No one knows about it except me, not even Dante." Maya stumbled as she tried to keep up with his long strides. She looked at the back of his head, at the tension in his shoulders. As they reached the bedroom, Leon began throwing clothes into a duffel bag with military efficiency. He opened a safe in the closet and pulled out a stack of cash and 2 extra magazines for his gun. Maya stood by the bed, watching him. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, a drumbeat of panic. But as she watched him check the safety on his weapon, as she watched him turn to her with eyes that promised violence to anyone who dared touch her, she felt a strange, terrifying clarity. She was scared. She was terrified of the bullets and the cartels and the blood that was sure to follow. But as Leon handed her a jacket and pulled her close, kissing her forehead with a desperate intensity, she realized something else. She was falling in love with him all over again. She was in love with the monster who was willing to eat the world to save her. "I have you," Leon whispered, his hand gripping the back of her neck. "I swear to you, Maya, I have you. "I know," she said, and she did. She knew that he would die for her. She just prayed that her love would not be the thing that killed him. "Let's go," Leon said. They walked out of the penthouse, leaving the luxury behind, stepping back into the darkness together. The safe house was a relic of the Cold War, a squat, concrete structure buried deep in the woodlands north of Riverton. It smelled of damper earth, stale heating oil, and neglect. Outside, the wind howled through the pines, a lonely, desolate sound that made the silence inside feel even heavier. Leon had been on the phone for hours. He paced the perimeter of the small, utilitarian living room, his voice a low rumble of command and controlled fury. He was speaking to Dante, coordinating the hunt for the men who had been tracking Maya. Maya sat on a frayed beige sofa, her knees pulled up to her chest. She watched Leon move. He was in his element here, a general at war. But every time he passed a window, checking the blinds, she saw the tension in his jaw. She felt trapped. The walls were closing in on her. To the south, the Valdez cartel was hunting her, eager to finish what they started. And right here, inside these walls, she was tethered to the very life that had destroyed her. She stood up, unable to sit still any longer. The air in the room was stifling. "I need to do something," she murmured, though Leon was too engrossed in his call to hear her. She walked over to the makeshift command center Leon had set up on the dining table. It was covered in maps, burner phones, and stacks of files he had swept into a bag before they fled the penthouse. Maya idly traced the edge of a manila folder. She needed to understand. She needed to know the shape of the beast that was chasing them. She opened the top file. It was boring financial data at first. Laundered revenue streams, dock schedules, union payoffs, but underneath that was a notebook. It was a black, leather-bound journal that Leon used to track personnel issues. Maya flipped it open. Her eyes scanned the pages, reading Leon's sharp, angular handwriting. Then, a loose sheet of yellow legal paper slipped out. She picked it up. The handwriting was different here. Elegant, looping, almost calligraphic. It was a report on internal liabilities. Her eyes snagged on a phrase in the second paragraph. "When the limb is infected, one must sever it to save the body. Sentiment is a weakness we cannot afford." The room seemed to tilt. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She knew that phrase. She knew that handwriting. 3 years ago, a rainy Tuesday night, a knock at the door of the penthouse while Leon was at a sit-down. A man standing in the hallway, rain dripping from his trench coat. He had looked at her with sad, sympathetic eyes and handed her an envelope of cash and a burner phone. "Leon is drowning." "Maya," the man had said, "the feds have him. If you stay, you become the weight that sinks him. You have to sever the limb to save the body." Maya stared at the yellow paper. The loop of the L, the sharp cross of the T. It was Dante. Her hands began to shake, the paper rattling like a dry leaf. Dante Russo, Leon's brother in Everything But Blood. The man Leon trusted with his life. The man who had smiled at her in the penthouse yesterday. He was the one. He had come to her that night. He had convinced her that Leon wanted her to leave, that her departure was the only way to keep Leon out of prison. He had given her the contact number for the safe exit, a number that had led her straight into the arms of the Valdez cartel. He had sold her. He had cleared the board. Maya looked up. Leon was standing by the window, phone pressed to his ear. "Yeah, Dante." Leon said into the receiver, "Keep looking. I want names by midnight." A wave of nausea rolled over Maya. Leon was talking to the architect of their destruction. He was asking the wolf to guard the sheep. "Leon," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. Leon didn't hear her. "I appreciate it. Brother, I know you are stretching resources. Just get it done." "Leon," Maya screamed. Leon spun around, the phone slipping slightly in his grip. He saw her face, pale as a sheet, eyes wide with horror, holding the yellow paper like it was a weapon. "I have to go," Leon said into the phone, his voice clipping. He hung up and tossed the phone onto the sofa. He crossed the room in 3 long strides. "What is it?" he asked, reaching for her. "What is wrong?" Maya took a step back, holding the paper up. It was him. She choked out. "Who?" Dante? Leon frowned, confusion crinkling the corners of his eyes. What are you talking about? Maya slammed the paper onto the table. Read it. That handwriting, that phrase. Sever the limb to save the body. Leon looked down at the note. That is Dante's handwriting. It is a report on the union strikes from last month. So what? He said that to me, Maya cried, her voice cracking. The night I left, he came to the penthouse. Leon, he told me the feds were closing in. He told me I was the liability. He used those exact words. Leon went still. The color drained from his face. Dante came to see you? He asked, his voice very quiet. Yes, Maya was shaking violently now. He told me he had arranged a way out. He gave me the contact for the people who turned out to be Valdez. He told me if I ever contacted you, the feds would swoop in and you would die in prison. Leon stared at her. His mind was racing, trying to find a defense, trying to find a logical explanation that didn't involve his right-hand man ripping his life apart. Dante told me you left a note, Leon whispered. He said he found it on the pillow. He said you wrote that you couldn't handle the life anymore. I never wrote a note. Maya sobbed. I would never have left you like that. I thought I was saving you. Leon looked back down at the paper. The pieces slammed together with the force of a train wreck. The leaks, the failed shipments, the sudden rise of the Valdez family in territories that were supposed to be secure. And Maya, Dante had removed Maya because she was the one variable he couldn't control. She was the one person Leon listened to above him. A roar built up in Leon's chest, a sound of pure, animalistic betrayal. He swept his arm across the table, sending the lamp, the files, and the maps crashing to the floor. I will kill him, Leon snarled. I will tear him apart with my bare hands. He turned toward the door, his hand going to his gun. No. Maya lunged forward, grabbing his arm. You cannot just go. That's what he wants. He has the Valdez cartel waiting for you. Leon stopped, his chest heaving. He looked down at her, his eyes wild. He did this to you, Leon said, his voice trembling with rage. He put you on that street. He let you starve, and I thanked him for it. I called him brother while you were sleeping in the dirt. Why didn't you come for me? Maya screamed. The question burst out of her, raw and bleeding, the anger she had been suppressing, the hurt of the last 3 years, finally exploded. If you loved me, why didn't you look? Why did you believe him? Why did you believe I would just walk away after everything we promised each other? I did look, Leon shouted back, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. I tore the city apart for 6 months. But Dante, he fed me false leads. He told me you were seen in Paris. He told me you were seen in New York with a banker. He showed me receipts. Maya, he forged credit card hits. You should have known, Maya cried, tears streaming down her face. You should have known me better than that. I thought you finally realized who I was, Leon yelled. I am a criminal, Maya. I am a monster. I thought you finally woke up and decided you deserved better. I let you go because I thought you wanted to be free of me. I didn't want to be free. I wanted us. Maya shoved him. It was a weak shove against his solid frame, but it carried the weight of 1,000 lonely nights. I was beaten. Leon, I was locked in a room and told that if I screamed, they would cut your throat. I lived in hell for 3 years because I was Leon Romano's wife, and you sat in your penthouse and drank scotch and felt sorry for yourself. I would have burned the empire, Leon roared, grabbing her shoulders. If I had known, if I had the slightest hint that you were in danger, I would have burned it all down. I would have put a bullet in Dante's head 3 years ago. Do not tell me I didn't love you. I died when you left. You didn't die. You got colder. I got colder because the only good thing in me was gone. They were screaming in each other's faces, the air between them electric with pain. It was ugly and raw. It was the poison of 3 years finally being lanced. Maya tried to pull away, to storm past him toward the bedroom, needing to escape the intensity. I can't do this, she gasped. I can't. Leon caught her, his arm hooked around her waist, hauling her back. He spun her around, and their bodies collided with a force that knocked the breath out of both of them. Don't you walk away from me, Leon growled. Not again, never again, let me go, Maya cried, pushing her hands against his chest. I can't. The anger in his eyes shifted. It didn't disappear, but it twisted, morphing into something desperate and scorching. He looked at her tear-streaked face, her trembling lips, the fire in her eyes that matched his own. He backed her up, his momentum carrying them both until her back hit the wall. It wasn't violent, but it was forceful. He pinned her there with his body, his hands coming up to frame her face, holding her still. "I am sorry," he whispered. His voice broke. The shout was gone, replaced by a hoarse, ragged plea. "I'm so sorry, Maya. I'm sorry I didn't know. I'm sorry I didn't find you. I would rather lose everything. I would rather lose my hands, my eyes, my life, than lose you again." Maya looked at him. She saw the tears standing in his eyes, unguarded and real. She felt the trembling in his hands as they held her face. The fight went out of her, the anger drained away, leaving only the gaping, aching need that she had been trying to ignore since she got into his car. "Leon," she whimpered. She grabbed the front of his shirt, her knuckles turning white. "Kiss me," she begged. "Make it stop hurting." Leon didn't hesitate. He crashed his mouth down on hers. It wasn't gentle. It was a collision of grief and starvation. It was a kiss that tasted of salt and desperation. Maya opened to him instantly, a moan vibrating in her throat as she pulled him closer, needing to feel the weight of him, the reality of him. Leon's hands slid down her back, pressing her hips into his. He devoured her. He kissed her like he was trying to breathe her air, like he was trying to rewrite the history of the last 3 years with the pressure of his lips. Maya's fingers threaded into his hair, gripping tight. She arched against him, her body remembering the rhythm of him, the fit of him. Leon broke the kiss to gasp for air, his forehead resting against hers. "I love you," he rasped. "I love you. I love you." "Show me," Maya whispered. He scooped her up. Maya wrapped her legs around his waist, burying her face in his neck as he carried her toward the bedroom. The duffel bag lay forgotten on the floor. The war with Valdez, the betrayal of Dante, it all ceased to exist. There was only this. There was only them. He kicked the bedroom door shut and carried her to the narrow, unmade bed. He lowered her down, following her, his body covering hers like a shield. His hands were everywhere, frantic, then suddenly, agonizingly gentle. He paused when his fingers brushed the hem of her shirt. He looked at her, a question in his dark eyes. Maya nodded. He peeled the shirt over her head. He stopped when he saw the bruises on her ribs, the yellow and purple marks left by the life she had been forced to live. Leon's face crumpled. He lowered his head, pressing his lips to the worst of the marks. It was a benediction, a silent promise of retribution against anyone who had touched her. Maya let out a shuddering breath, her hands moving over his shoulders, feeling the tension in his muscles. She needed him to be close. She needed the skin-to-skin contact to prove that the nightmare was over. When he finally settled over her, skin against skin, it felt like coming home after a long, brutal war. There was no finesse, no practiced seduction. It was raw clinging. It was the desperate entanglement of two people who had been drowning and had finally found a raft. Maya dug her fingers into his back, anchoring him. Leon buried his face in the crook of her neck, murmuring her name over and over, like a prayer. Every touch was heavy with emotion, every movement a reclamation. He treated her body like it was sacred, terrified of breaking her, yet unable to keep deeper distances. They moved together in the dim light of the safe house, shedding the anger, shedding the betrayal, shedding the years of silence. It was a purging. It was a desperate affirmation that they were alive, and they were together. Later, the room was quiet, save for the sound of the wind outside and their synchronized breathing. The single lamp on the bedside table cast long, soft shadows across the room. They lay tangled together under the scratchy wool blanket. Maya's head rested on Leon's chest. His arm was wrapped tightly around her, his hand idly stroking her hair. Maya traced the line of a scar on his chest with her fingertip. "I still have nightmares," she whispered into the silence. Leon's hand paused in her hair, then resumed its gentle rhythm. "I know," he said softly. "I heard you last night. I see the man who threatened me." She admitted. "I see his face. But sometimes I see you. I see you turning your back on me. That one hurts more." Leon tightened his grip on her. "I'm never turning my back on you again," he vowed. "I'm terrified." "Maya." "You?" "Terrified." He let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "I am terrified that my world is going to eat you alive. I am terrified that I cannot wash the blood off my hands fast enough to hold you without staining you." Maya lifted her head, resting her chin on his chest so she could look him in the eye. "We are already stained. Leon, both of us." She reached up and touched his face, her thumb brushing his lower lip. "But we are together, and we know the truth now." Leon turned his head, kissing her palm. "Dante has to go," he said. His voice was calm now, devoid of the earlier shouting, but it was the cold, deadly calm of a judgment past. "He has to answer for what he did," Maya agreed. "And the Valdez cartel, they have to be stopped. They are trafficking women. Leon, I saw things. I saw girls who didn't have someone to come looking for them." Leon's eyes darkened. "We will take them down," he said. "Not just for us, but to burn the rot out." "How?" Maya asked. "Dante knows everything. He knows your safe houses, your accounts, your strategies. He's probably tracking this location right now." Leon sat up slowly, the sheet pooling at his waist. He looked at the wall, his mind working, the strategist taking over. "He knows the old Leon," he said. "He knows the Leon who trusted him. He knows the Leon who was grieving and distracted." He looked down at Maya, and a grim smile touched his lips. "He does not know this Leon. He does not know what I am capable of when I have you back." He reached for his phone on the nightstand. "We are going to give him exactly what he wants," Leon said. "We are going to feed him a lie so big he chokes on it." Maya sat up beside him, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. She felt a flicker of fear. Yes, but it was outweighed by a new, steely resolve. She was done being the victim. She was done hiding in alleys. "What do we do?" she asked. Leon took her hand, interlacing their fingers. "We go back to Riverton," he said, "and we finish this." The city of Riverton was a different beast when viewed from the shadows. For a decade. Leon Romano had owned the skyline, looking down from the penthouse of the Obsidian Tower. Now, wearing a nondescript utility jacket and a baseball cap pulled low, he moved through the grimy alleyways of the meatpacking district like a ghost. He had left Maya at the safe house 2 hours ago. Leaving her had felt like tearing a limb from his own body. She had stood in the doorway, wrapped in a thick blanket, her eyes wide and filled with a terrifying mixture of trust and fear. He had left her with Nico, a 60-year-old former enforcer who was as loyal as a dog and twice as mean. Nico would die before he let anyone through that door. Leon needed that assurance, because what he was doing tonight required absolute focus. He slipped through the rear service entrance of the Velvet Room, a low-level club that smelled of stale beer and bad decisions. He knew Dante favored this place for off-the-books meetings because the music was loud enough to scramble listening devices, and the owner owed the Romanos $50,000. Leon moved to the ventilation access he had used years ago when he was just a soldier making his bones. He climbed a rusted ladder, settling into a crawl space that looked down through a grate into the private office below. Dante was there. Seeing him made Leon's stomach turn. Dante sat on a leather sofa, looking relaxed, a crystal tumbler of scotch in his hand. Across from him sat 2 men. One was Hector Salamanca, a lieutenant in the Valdez cartel. The other was a man in a cheap suit Leon recognized, a lawyer named Millers who handled plea deals for the Federal Organized Crime Division. The sight of them together was a physical blow. The Romano family, the Valdez cartel, and the feds. It was an unholy trinity. Leon adjusted his position, pressing his ear toward the grate. The bass from the club thrummed in the floor, but the office was soundproofed enough for voices to carry. "We need a timeline," the lawyer said, his voice nasally and impatient. "The FOCD is getting restless. They want the head of the snake." "You will get him," Dante said, swirling his drink. Leon is panicked. He's running blind. I have him chasing shadows in the north woods. And the girl? Salamanca asked. His voice was thick, accented. My boss wants the girl. She knows too much about our operations. Plus, she cost us a lot of money when she ran. You will get her, too, Dante promised. He took a sip of scotch, the very picture of casual betrayal. Once I hand Leon over to the feds, I will give you the location of the girl. You can do whatever you want with her. Just make sure she never testifies. Leon's hands clenched into fists so tight his fingernails broke the skin of his palms. He stared down through the grate, imagining the feel of his hands around Dante's throat. Dante was not just selling him out. He was trading Maya like cattle to the butchers who had tormented her. The lawyer nodded. And in exchange, you get full immunity and control of the remaining Romano assets in the shipping sector. Clean slate, Dante said, raising his glass in a toast. The king is dead. Long live the king. Leon pulled back from the grate, his breath coming in shallow. Silent rasps. He had heard enough. The rage that filled him was cold, absolute, and deadly, but he could not act yet. Killing Dante now would leave the Valdez network intact and the feds still hunting him. He needed to destroy them all at once. At the safe house. The silence was deafening. Maya paced the living room, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. Nico sat in the corner armchair. Cleaning a shotgun with methodical slowness. "You're going to wear a hole in the rug. Mrs. Romano," Nico rumbled. Maya stopped. "Do not call me that. Old habits." Nico shrugged. "The boss said you are to rest." "I cannot rest," Maya snapped. She looked at the laptop sitting on the dining table. It was encrypted, locked down. But she had watched Leon type in his passwords for years. She knew the cipher he used. It was the date of their first date, followed by the street number of his childhood home. "Nico," she said, walking over to the table. "I need to see the files." Nico frowned. Boss said no. "The boss is out there risking his life because we do not have the full picture," Maya argued. She opened the laptop. Leon brought the hard drives from the office. "There are files here on Dante's side businesses. If we can find what he is moving for Valdez, we have leverage." Nico hesitated, looking at the door, then back at Maya. Her jaw was set, her eyes fierce. She did not look like the broken woman who had arrived 2 days ago. She looked like a woman preparing for war. "Make it quick," Nico grumbled. Maya sat down and began to type. Her fingers flew across the keys. She bypassed the surface-level ledgers and dug into the hidden subdirectories, the ones Dante thought he had buried deep enough. She found a folder labeled Logistics South River. She opened the manifest. It was a shipment scheduled for tomorrow night. The cargo was listed as industrial textiles, but the weight distribution was wrong. And there was a secondary note attached to the file, an encrypted memo from Valdez to Dante. Maya decrypted it. The text appeared on the screen. Stark and horrifying. 30 units, female. Ages 18 to 25. Origin, Eastern Europe. Destination, Valdez Distribution Hub. Maya put a hand over her mouth, nausea rolling in her gut. It was not drugs. It was not guns. Dante was moving women. She stared at the screen, tears pricking her eyes. She remembered the fear of the last 3 years, the constant threat of being owned, being used. She remembered the girls she had seen in the Valdez safe houses, girls who had vanished in the night. This was what Dante was building his new empire on. She grabbed the phone Leon had left for emergencies. Nico stood up, alarmed. "Who are you calling?" "Leon," Maya said, her voice shaking with fury. "I know how to bring them down." The Midnight Motel was a relic of the 1950s. Peeling paint and a flickering neon sign that buzzed like an angry hornet. Room 12 was cramped, smelling of lemon polish and stale cigarettes. Detective Lila Hart stood by the window, peering through the blinds. She was a sharp-featured woman in her 40s, known for being the only cop in the organized crime task force who couldn't be bought. She wore a leather jacket and an expression of deep skepticism. "You are asking for a lot, Romano," Lila said, turning to face the room. Leon sat on the edge of the bed. Maya sat next to him, her knee pressed firmly against his. Her hand rested on his thigh, her fingers occasionally squeezing his muscle as if to reassure herself he was real. "I am giving you a career-making bust," Leon said calmly. "You get Dante Russo, you get Hector Salamanca and the Valdez leadership, and you get a human trafficking ring before it leaves the city." "And in exchange?" Lila asked. "Immunity for Maya," Leon said, "and protection. Real protection. Not the leaky sieve the FOCD offers. I want her relocated with a new identity if this goes south. And for you?" Leon looked at Maya. He saw the way she was watching him, her eyes wide and pleading. "I will take the fall for the RICO charges," Leon said, "but I want a reduced sentence. 10 years. Eligible for parole in 5. And I want the facility to be minimum security." Lila raised an eyebrow. "You are offering to go to prison? The Leon Romano? I am done," Leon said. "I am retiring. I just want to make sure the garbage is taken out before I turn off the lights." Lila looked at Maya. She studied the younger woman's face, the fading bruises, the gauntness that spoke of long suffering. "Is this true?" Lila asked. "Can you testify to the Valdez connection?" Maya took a deep breath. Her hands were trembling in her lap, but her voice was steady. "I lived it, detective. I know how they operate. I know where they keep the money. And I know that Dante Russo sold me to them to cover his own tracks." Maya reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. "This is the manifest for tomorrow night," she said. "They are moving 30 women through the old textile warehouse on the river. Dante and Valdez will be there to oversee the transfer of ownership." Lila took the drive. She looked at Leon, then back at Maya. The skepticism faded, replaced by a grim determination. "If this checks out," Lila said, "we have a deal." The argument in the parking lot of the warehouse was quiet, desperate, and vicious. The Riverside district was shrouded in fog. The warehouse loomed like a skeletal beast against the gray sky. Lila's team was already in position, hidden in the surrounding structures. Leon stood by the back of a nondescript sedan, gripping Maya's shoulders. "No," he hissed. "Absolutely not. You are staying in the van with the support team." "I am not staying in the van," Maya whispered furiously. "I need to be there. Leon—" "I need to see him go down. It is too dangerous," Leon argued, his forehead pressing against hers. "If bullets start flying—" "Maya, I cannot focus if I'm worried about you taking a stray round. I will be on the catwalk with Lila," Maya insisted. "We will be behind bulletproof glass in the foreman's office until the signal is given. I am not letting you face him alone. You are walking into a room with men who want you dead." Leon closed his eyes, his breathing ragged. He pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her so tight it almost hurt. "If anything happens to you," he whispered, his voice cracking, "if I lose you again, it will break me. I will not survive it. Maya, I mean that." Maya pulled back slightly. She cupped his face in her hands, her thumbs tracing the sharp line of his cheekbones. She looked into his dark, tortured eyes. "I am not running this time," she promised. "We do this together, or we do not do it at all." Leon searched her face. He saw the resolve there. He saw the same steel that had kept her alive on the streets for 3 years. She was not a civilian anymore. She was a survivor. "Okay," he breathed, defeated by her courage. "Okay, but you stay down. You stay behind Lila until the cuffs are on. Promise me. I promise." He kissed her. It was a hard, swift kiss, sealing the pact. Then he turned and walked toward the dark maw of the warehouse entrance. The interior of the warehouse was vast and cold. It smelled of rust and damp river water. In the center of the concrete floor, under the harsh glare of a single hanging worklight, stood Dante Russo. He was flanked by 3 of his own men. Opposite him stood Hector Salamanca and 4 Valdez soldiers. Between them was a shipping container, the door slightly ajar. Leon watched from the shadows of a stack of crates. He checked his wire, tapping his chest once. He stepped out. "Good evening, gentlemen," Leon's voice boomed through the empty space. Dante spun around. His hand went to his jacket, then stopped when he saw Leon walking calmly toward them. Hands open and empty. "Leon," Dante said, his smile faltering for a microsecond before recovering. "We were just—" Handling the logistics you asked for. Cut the act. Dante, Leon said, stopping 10 feet away. It is insulting. I know about the deal with the feds. I know about the immunity. And I know you are selling these women to Valdez. Dante's face hardened. The pretense dropped. He straightened his coat. You were always too sentimental. Leon, Dante said coldly, you let your heart get in the way of business. The Romano family was drowning. I did what I had to do to save the structure. By selling my wife, Leon asked, his voice deadly soft. She was a liability. Dante spat. She made you soft, and look at you now. You are walking into a meeting you cannot win, all because you could not let her go. So you admit it. Leon goaded, taking a step closer. You set her up. You sent her to the cartel. I sent her where she belonged. Dante sneered. And tonight, I am finishing the job. Dante looked at Salamanca. Kill him, Dante ordered. Salamanca raised his hand, signaling his men. Now, Leon shouted. Glass shattered high above. Flashbang grenades dropped from the catwalks, exploding in blinding bursts of white light and deafening bangs. Police, drop your weapons! Lila's voice amplified over a loudspeaker. Panic erupted. The Valdez men scrambled for cover, firing blindly into the rafters. Lila's tactical team repelled from the skylights, weapons drawn. Dante stumbled back, blinded by the flash. He drew his gun, a silver automatic, swinging it wildly. He realized instantly he had been set up. He realized his immunity was gone. His empire was ash. Leon stood his ground, his own gun now in his hand, aiming at Salamanca. Dante blinked, his vision clearing. He looked up toward the foreman's office on the upper catwalk. He saw movement. He saw a face he recognized. Maya. She was leaning over the railing, pointing down, shouting something to Lila. A twisted snarl curled Dante's lip. If he was going down, he was taking the reason for his failure with him. He raised his gun, ignoring Leon, ignoring the SWAT team. He aimed high. He aimed at the woman on the catwalk. Leon saw the shift in Dante's gaze. He saw the barrel rise. No! Leon screamed. Time seemed to stretch into a thick, syrupy, slow motion. Leon didn't think. He didn't calculate the odds. He simply moved. He lunged to the right, throwing his body into the open space between Dante's gun and the catwalk. The gunshot cracked through the warehouse, sharp and final. Leon felt a sledgehammer hit his side. The breath was driven from his lungs. The impact spun him around, and his legs turned to water. He hit the concrete hard. Leon! The scream came from above, tearing through the chaos. It was Maya. Leon lay on his back, staring up at the high, vaulted ceiling. A red stain was spreading across his white shirt, blooming like a dark flower, through the ringing in his ears. He heard the stampede of boots. He saw Lila's team tackle Dante, pinning him to the ground. He saw Salamanca in cuffs, but his vision was tunneling. The edges of the world were turning gray. He tried to lift his head. He needed to see her. He needed to know she was safe. Movement on the stairs. Someone was running down the metal steps, the clatter echoing. Maya ran toward him, sliding on her knees across the dirty concrete. Her hands were on him instantly, pressing down on the wound, warm and frantic. Leon, stay with me. She was sobbing, her tears falling onto his face. You promised we would do this together. Leon managed a weak smile. He reached up, his hand trembling, and brushed a tear from her cheek. His fingers left a smear of blood on her skin. I got him, he whispered, his voice bubbling. He can't hurt you anymore. No, do not talk, Maya cried, looking around wildly. Medic, we need a medic. Leon's hand fell to the floor. The pain was fading, replaced by a heavy, cold numbness. He looked at Maya one last time. She was safe. The monster was in chains. He had kept his vow. His eyes drifted shut. The darkness rose up to claim him, and he let it take him. The sound of Maya screaming his name, the last thing tethering him to the earth. The world came back in fragments. First, there was the smell of antiseptic and floor wax. Then, the rhythmic, electronic chirping of a machine keeping time with a heartbeat. Finally, the dull, throbbing ache in his side that felt like he had been kicked by a horse. Leon Romano opened his eyes. The hospital room was dim. illuminated only by the pale blue glow of the monitors and the streetlights filtering through the blinds. He blinked, his mouth tasting of cotton and metal. He tried to move his hand and realized he was anchored. He looked down. Maya was asleep in the uncomfortable vinyl chair pulled right up to the bedside rail. Her head rested on the mattress near his hip. Her hair was messy, fanned out over the white sheets like dark ink. But it was her hand that held him. Her fingers were wrapped tight around his, gripping him even in her sleep, as if she were the only thing keeping him from drifting away. Leon watched her for a long moment. He saw the puffiness around her eyes, the dried tear tracks on her cheeks. He saw the exhaustion etched into the line of her jaw. He squeezed her fingers. It was a weak gesture, his strength sapped by blood loss and surgery. But it was enough. Maya jerked awake. She sat up instantly, her eyes wide and panicked, scanning his face. When she saw his eyes were open, the breath rushed out of her in a broken sob. "Leon," she whispered. "Hey," he rasped. His voice sounded like gravel. Maya leaned over him, her hands hovering over his chest, afraid to touch him and cause pain. Tears spilled over her lashes again. Hot and fast. "You are an idiot," she choked out, a tremulous smile fighting through the weeping. "You are such an idiot, you jumped in front of a gun." "Who does that?" "I promised," Leon whispered. "I said I would not let him hurt you." Maya let out a wet, shaky laugh. She pressed her forehead against his, closing her eyes. Her skin was cool against his feverish brow. "Thank you." She breathed against his skin. "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for staying." "I am not going anywhere," Leon said. "Not without you." The door opened softly. Leon shifted his gaze to see Detective Lila Hart standing in the doorway. She looked tired, holding a cup of vending machine coffee, but there was a distinct lack of tension in her shoulders. "Welcome back to the land of the living," Lila said, walking to the foot of the bed. "Did we get him?" Leon asked. The question was sharp, cutting through the haze of painkillers. Lila nodded. "We got them all. Dante is in custody. He's singing like a canary trying to save his own neck, but the recording from the warehouse is damning. We have him on conspiracy, trafficking, attempted murder, and federal racketeering. Valdez and Salamanca are in holding, and the feds are already dismantling their distribution network based on the files Maya decrypted." Leon let out a long breath, his head falling back against the pillow. "It is over." "Not quite," Lila said gently. The air in the room shifted. Maya sat up straight, her hand tightening on Leon's. Lila looked at Leon with a mixture of respect and professional duty. "The deal is on the table. Leon, the prosecutor, agreed to the terms, but only if you testify. You have to get on the stand and lay it all out. The structure of the Romano family, the payoffs, the history, you have to burn it down publicly." Leon looked at the ceiling. He knew what that meant. It meant the end of the Romano name. It meant he would be branded a rat by the underworld. He would be stripping himself of the title he had worn since he was 25. He would no longer be the king of Riverton. He would just be a man with a criminal record. He looked at Maya. She was watching him, fear and hope warring in her eyes. She knew what his empire meant to him. She knew it was his armor, his identity. Leon moved his hand, brushing his thumb over her knuckles. He remembered the cold street corner. He remembered the fear in her eyes when she thought he would choose the business over her. He looked at the empire in his mind, the money, the power, the violence, and he realized it was just ash. It was heavy, choking ash that had almost cost him the woman sitting beside him. "Do it," Leon said to Lila. "I will testify. I will give you everything." The courtroom was packed. The air conditioner hummed, fighting a losing battle against the heat of bodies and tension. Reporters filled the back rows, sketching pads ready. Leon sat at the witness stand. He wore a simple gray suit, not the expensive Italian cuts he used to favor. He looked tired, and he moved stiffly, favoring his left side where the bullet wound was still healing. But his voice was steady. For 3 days, he dismantled his life. He spoke clearly and without hesitation. He detailed the hierarchy. He explained the laundering schemes. He looked Dante Russo in the eye. Dante, who sat at the defense table, pale and shaking, and described exactly how his former brother had betrayed the code they swore to uphold. "I built an organization based on loyalty," Leon told the jury. "But it was a lie. It was a machine that chewed people up, and when it tried to chew up my wife, I decided to break the machine. When it was Maya's turn, the courtroom went silent. She stood at the podium for her victim impact statement. She did not look at Dante. She looked at Leon. She spoke of the fear. She spoke of the nights spent sleeping in doorways, terrified to close her eyes. She spoke of the girls she had seen in the Valdez warehouses, girls who did not have a husband coming to save them. "Leon Romano is not a hero in the traditional sense," Maya said, her voice ringing clear. "He's done terrible things, but he is the only man who was willing to destroy his own power to save a life. He saved me, and in doing so, he saved himself." The gavel came down 2 weeks later. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on her nose, read the sentence. Because of his extensive cooperation, the dismantling of 2 major crime syndicates, and the recovery of 30 trafficking victims, the state was lenient. 7 years, the judge announced, eligible for parole in 4 with good behavior. It was a prison sentence, but it felt like a lifeline. The bailiffs moved in to take Leon into custody. The courtroom erupted in noise, reporters shouting questions, family members weeping. Leon stood up. He did not look at the guards. He looked at Maya, who was standing in the front row. She stepped over the barrier. The bailiffs started to move, but Lila Hart held up a hand. "Let them have a minute," she ordered. Maya ran to him. Leon caught her, ignoring the pain in his side. She slammed into his chest, her arms wrapping around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. 4 years, she sobbed. "I can do 4 years. I will wait. I will wait forever." Leon cupped her face, tilting her head back. He looked at her like a man memorizing the sun before going into a cave. "You live your life," he commanded softly. "You build something good. And keep a light on for me. I promise." She cried. He kissed her. It was not a polite goodbye. It was a searing, desperate claim. He kissed her with everything he had, pouring all his regret and all his love into the contact. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, fusing their mouths together. For a moment, the courtroom, the judge, and the handcuffs waiting for him ceased to exist. There was only Maya when they broke apart, breathless and trembling. Leon rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you," she answered. He pulled away. Turning to the bailiffs, he held his hands out, wrists together. As the steel cuffs clicked shut, he felt lighter than he had in years. The seasons marked the time. Winter turned to spring. Spring bled into the humid heat of summer. Leaves turned gold and fell, and snow blanketed the prison yard. Maya never missed a visitation day. She would arrive wearing sensible clothes, her hair tied back, looking healthier and stronger with each visit. They sat at a small metal table in the crowded visitation room, surrounded by other fractured families. They could not touch much, just hands clasped tightly on the tabletop. But they talked. They talked about the books Leon was reading in the prison library. They talked about the GED classes he was tutoring. Maya talked about her work. She had started volunteering at a shelter for women, using her own experience to help others navigate the bureaucracy of social services. "I helped a girl get her first apartment today," she told him one rainy November afternoon, her eyes shining. "She reminded me of me." Leon smiled, rubbing his thumb over the back of her hand. "You're doing good work, Maya. You are turning the pain into purpose." "So are you," she said. "The visits always ended the same way." The guard would call time. They would stand up, and for one brief, sanctioned moment, they were allowed a goodbye kiss. It was always chaste, scrutinized by the guards, but it carried the weight of the world. It was a promise renewed. It was fuel for the lonely nights that followed. The gate buzzed, a heavy, mechanical sound that echoed in the morning air. The steel door slid open slowly. Leon stepped out. He carried a small duffel bag with the few personal effects he had been allowed to keep. He wore a pair of jeans and a plain white t-shirt that stretched across his chest. He was leaner now. the softness of the high life burned away by years of prison workouts and manual labor. His hair was slightly longer, touching his collar. He took a deep breath. The air tasted of diesel and rain, but mostly, it tasted of freedom. He looked down the long, empty road leading away from the facility. A car was parked on the shoulder, a modest gray sedan. Maya was standing next to it. She wore a tan trench coat against the chill of the early spring morning. Her hands were deep in her pockets. When she saw him, she went still. Leon dropped his bag. Maya moved. She didn't walk, she ran. She sprinted across the asphalt, her coat flying out behind her. Leon met her halfway. She launched herself at him, and he caught her, lifting her off her feet. He spun her around, burying his face in her neck, inhaling the scent of her, vanilla, rain, and home. "You are here." She wept into his shoulder. "You are really here." "I am here," Leon said, his voice thick with emotion. "I am done. I am home." He set her down but didn't let go. He held her face, looking at the lines that time had etched there, finding them beautiful. "Let's go home," he said. Their new apartment was nothing like the penthouse. It was a third-floor walk-up in a quiet, working-class neighborhood on the south side of Riverton. The floors creaked, and the view was of a brick alleyway. Not the glittering skyline, but it was warm. It was filled with plants Maya had nurtured. It smelled of dinner cooking on the stove. Leon worked as a site manager for a small construction firm. He came home with dust on his boots and calluses on his hands, tired in a way that felt honest. Maya ran the community outreach program at the shelter. They were not rich. They were not powerful. They were just people. On a Tuesday evening, 6 months after his release, the rain was drumming softly against the window pane. They had finished dinner and were sitting on the worn fabric sofa. The only light came from a few lamps casting a golden glow across the room. Leon pulled Maya onto his lap. She settled there easily, her head resting on his shoulder, her legs draped over his. He ran his hand slowly down the curve of her spine, feeling the tension melt out of her. "Happy?" he asked quietly. Maya lifted her head. She looked at him, really looked at him. She traced the silver at his temples. She traced the line of his jaw. "I have never been happier," she whispered. She moved her hand down to his side. Her fingers found the ridge of the scar tissue just above his hip bone, the puckered, raised skin where the bullet had entered. She traced the shape of it through his thin cotton shirt. Leon flinched slightly, not from pain, but from the intensity of the sensation. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "Only when it rains." He lied softly. He covered her hand with his, pressing her palm against the scar. "It reminds me," he said. "Reminds you of what?" "Of what I almost lost, and what I gained." Maya leaned in and kissed him. It was slow, deep, and filled with a profound sense of safety. There was no desperation anymore. There was no fear that he would be taken away in the night. She shifted, straddling his lap, her hands moving up to cup his neck. Leon groaned low in his throat, his hands gripping her waist, pulling her flush against him. "I love you, Leon," she breathed against his lips. He kissed her back, a slow burn that started in his chest and spread to his fingertips. He kissed her with the reverence of a man who had walked through fire to get to this moment. "Take me to bed," she whispered. Leon stood up, lifting her effortlessly in his arms. He carried her to their small bedroom, where the sheets were cotton, not silk, and the air was filled with peace. Later. The apartment was silent. The rain had stopped, leaving behind the fresh, clean smell of wet pavement. Leon lay awake in the dark. Maya was asleep against his chest, her breathing steady and deep. Her arm was thrown across him, claiming him even in her dreams. He stared at the ceiling, tracing the shadows. He thought back to that night on the corner, the freezing wind, the sight of her holding that cardboard sign, the way his heart had shattered in his chest. He had been a king then. He had owned the city, but he had been empty. He had been a man living in a glass tower, guarding a pile of gold while his soul rotted. He looked down at the woman in his arms. He had lost the money. He had lost the reputation. He had lost the power to snap his fingers and make people disappear. He tightened his arm around her, pulling her closer. She stirred slightly, murmuring his name in her sleep, and settled back down. He kissed the top of her head. He had lost everything, and it was the best trade he had ever made. Outside, the city lights flickered softly, a distant galaxy that no longer held any sway over him. He closed his eyes, listening to the beat of Maya's heart against his own, and for the first time in his life. Leon Romano slept without a gun under his pillow. He was finally, truly, a free man. Thank you so much for listening to the story of Leon and Maya. I hope their journey from heartbreak to redemption touched you as much as it did me. Writing their struggle and their ultimate victory was an emotional ride. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening from? Please leave a comment below and let me know your country or city. What did you think of the ending? Did Leon make the right choice? If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. We have many more passionate, gritty, and emotional stories coming your way. Thank you for your support, and see you in the next story.